Welcome back, friends. I'm really excited to be sharing a mini episode with you today about vitamin D, and I am hoping to help to spark some thoughts in your mind as well as answer a little bit of the question about when can I stop taking my vitamin D, since it's pretty much almost spring, the sun is shining more. I can stop taking it, right? So, I want to just share with you a couple of facts about vitamin D and a little bit of my opinion on vitamin D and how I personally use it. And before I get into any of this, I need to preface it all by saying none of this is to be construed as medical advice in any way. You always want to check with your physician, and of course, you can always get your vitamin D blood serum levels checked if it's something that you're curious about. However, I have recently learned that about 80% of the population of North America is vitamin D deficient. Some people even think that because they live in a sunny place like Arizona that they don't have to supplement with vitamin D. But in fact, this is not the case because the amount of vitamin D that your body can generate through sun exposure is dependent on your latitude, the angle of the sun, the amount of skin you have exposed, the color of your skin, and many other factors. Amazing, right? The other thing to note is that vitamin D is best generated by your skin through sun exposure. A lot of the types of supplemental vitamin D that are out there, specifically the ones that are commonly added to foods like dairy, are a type that is not very well absorbed by the body, and it's done in amounts that are not truly significant to helping to overcome any kind of deficiency that you may have with your vitamin D. So if you live further north than Arizona, you definitely need to be supplementing with vitamin D through the winter months. And where I live here in North Dakota, it's pretty far north. And so here, what our situation is when we're between October to November through mid-February, where the sun is actually so low here that the angle is such that even if you're outside on a sunny day, you might be getting sun on your skin, but your skin is not actually able to create or generate vitamin D through the UVB rays that are in the sunlight, because the angle means that those rays are weak and they're actually not able to create enough energy, in a way, in a sense, to be able to generate that vitamin D in the skin. So this is really confusing. And several years ago, I started looking into vitamin D supplementation. I've been supplementing with vitamin D for a long time because I live in North Dakota, but the question is always, well, when you do it, how much, what kind do you take? And there's different things that are benefits to taking vitamin D, such as healthy bones that may help to support your immunity. My personal opinion and my personal experience with vitamin D is that I experience a lack of vitamin D in my moods, especially through the darker, colder winter months. This may look like a little bit of a seasonal affective thing going on. It may look like depression sort of symptoms. For me, it actually is angst. I get really angsty when I do not have adequate levels of vitamin D in my body. So I recently, a couple of years ago, got tested and I was in fact deficient, even with supplementation. So I started looking into this a little bit more because I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, this is sort of a weird vitamin. Our skin can make it. And in fact, vitamin D is not technically a vitamin. It is a hormone that is then converted into a vitamin by several of your organs, your liver and your kidney, I believe. So when we're talking about vitamin D, we're talking about a very unique nutrient. And we're talking about a nutrient that is very tied in a daily way with nature, and especially with the sun and the energy of the sun, because it is the UVB rays of the sun that actually help to create and generate the type of vitamin D that our body is really adapted to using, which is our own natural vitamin D made by our skin. So how do you unpack all of that, and how do you even know what you are supposed to do? Well, never fear, because I love biohacking and I found an app. So there is this free app. It's called DMinder, DMinder, and it looks like this for those of you that are looking on YouTube. And what you can do with this is what you will do is you will put in your location, your skin type. So like a person of color is going to have darker skin, obviously, and the melanin in the skin is actually going to prevent even more of those UVB rays penetrating and producing vitamin D. Those of us with lighter skin have a little bit easier time with making vitamin D from the sun, so you need to put that in, and several other like little things that you need to input. And I love this app because it is research and science based, and it was actually created by the World Authority on Vitamin D, whose name is Dr. Michael Holick, I believe. And a little bit of a controversial guy, but he has done an extensive amount of vitamin D research throughout his entire career as an endocrinologist. And he has done a lot of determining how to figure out what our vitamin D levels are, and then what types of exposure to sun will actually promote vitamin D production, with the idea that he's a physician, so he also is aware of skin cancer risk. So this is an interesting app that is based on a lot of his research and research of others that has been compiled into this to make basically a timer for you. So what this app will show us is where we are in the calendar year, meaning we are 4 days from the equinox right now. We are almost to spring. And what this will then tell us is when our solar noon is, and our solar noon right now is at 12:58. The current angle of the sun, 30 degrees, and more than that, it'll tell you the weather, which is kind of nice, your ozone, and also the UV index. Now, the UV index is something that is very important to keep track of anytime you're going to have sun exposure on your skin. My personal opinion is that for average everyday sun exposure, I do not personally use sunscreen. Instead, I'm very smart about my sun exposure. And in the summer, I watch all day long the UV index, and I try to stay out of the sun when it's above, especially when it's above 5. But I even start getting antsy if it's above 3, because that's when you're going to have the more intense levels of UV that a lot of research seems to indicate is connected to skin cancer. However, the opposite way of thinking about that is that low vitamin D levels have also been linked to different types of cancers. So not having a vital nutrient in your body is something that is going to make it hard for your body to stay healthy. So with this DMinder app, you can actually look at what your UV index is, and that's right here. And this is the weather, and that shows you your different angles of the sun and whatnot. And when you want to do sun exposure, you have to do it within the time of day that you can actually generate vitamin D. Okay, so again, the angle of the sun from the equator up is important, and the angle of the sun then in the daily sky in relation to noon is also important, because too early in the day or too late in the day, even though the sun is shining, you might not be able to generate vitamin D because the energy, the pressure, however you want to conceive of that, is not going to be strong enough in order to generate the vitamin D with those UVB rays. And if your sky is overcast, like my sky is today, you are not going to be able to generate the vitamin D at all. And so it won't even give you the option to start your timer on days like this. It's just telling you straight out, you can't make vitamin D right now. So for us, what I do is I know that once we get into November, December, January, and February, I'm not going to be able to generate any vitamin D from the sun at the latitude that I live here in North Dakota. What's nice is that for you, wherever you live, this is going to calculate for where you live. When you do decide to have the sun exposure, you're going to have an option for a little timer here. And you hit the timer and you're going to tell it, okay, this much of my skin is exposed, and a few other details in relation to your sun exposure, and then it basically starts a timer. And as it goes around, it tells you how many IUI of vitamin D that you are estimated to have generated during your sun session. It also is a great way to keep track of not overexposing yourself to the sun. So for those of you that are concerned about skin cancer, which we all should be aware of, this is a tool that can actually help you from going too far with this. Because once you get beyond a certain amount of vitamin D, you have now saturated your system. You don't need to make any more. And so sun exposure beyond that is not going to be beneficial, and too much could actually be damaging. So I feel like this is a really, really incredible tool. Now, because in the north, there's a whole bunch of time of the year that I can't generate vitamin D, and because even getting into springtime and fall, there's only a few hours of the day that are actually available to me to generate vitamin D from the sun, I know that I need to supplement. And over the years, I've done a lot of different types of vitamin D supplementation. I've done lots of different types of capsules. And to be honest, usually about this time of year, I'm really starting to drag. You know, the angsty feelings of like, the thing that happens when you're like, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, I'm discontent, I'm ennui, all of those types of feelings. I have personally come to connect with lower levels of vitamin D because for me, it only starts to happen about this time of year, right around the spring equinox, when my body has gone the longest amount of time without any sun exposure that will actually produce vitamin D. Interesting, right? And I've also noticed that if I don't supplement continuously through the winter, by the time I get into April and May, my angsty levels are off the charts. This winter, I tried something different, and I tried a different type of vitamin D drop. I'm going to be putting the link for this in the show notes. And why I like this vitamin D drop is, first of all, very often the body will prefer to absorb nutrient from a liquid source like this rather than a capsule. A lot of times, depending on the quality and type of capsule and the quality of your own digestion, you might not even get that much out of using a capsule. When you have the vitamin D directly in an olive oil base like this is, then you're able to just let your body absorb it right away as it goes into your digestive tract. I notice a huge difference in that. The other thing that I love about these vitamin D drops is that they are very, very potent. Now, the amount of vitamin D that you supplement with is something that you do want to be cautious of because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, not a water-soluble vitamin, meaning that you can overdose on it. However, a lot of physicians that I've talked to in the area where I live are not averse to people going up to even as high as 10,000 IUIs, especially through the winter, as we are just so incapable of getting it from most other sources. Now, you can get it from different types of fish oils and that sort of thing as well. But for me, I don't always prefer those types of things. I'd rather have something like this that it's one and done. And what I love about this, there's 900 servings in here. So one drop, not dropper, one drop of this stuff contains 2,000 IUI. Now that is 250% of the RDA, the recommended daily value that they suggest for daily intake. But remember that that amount is the amount that you need to survive, not the amount that you necessarily need to thrive. So this would be something that you would want to chat with your doctor or your naturopath about, maybe even get your blood serum levels tested for vitamin D and see where you are. For me, I know that mine are very low, and I know where I live is not helping the situation. So I actually set my DMinder to I think it's about 10,000 IUI that I want to be aware of. And this, you can actually include any supplemental vitamin D that you take in your DMinder, so that if you are already supplementing with a drop or a capsule, the DMinder app knows that. And when you go out in the sun, it will already have accounted for the D that you would have taken internally as some kind of a supplement, so that you're not getting too much. And that's another thing that I really appreciate about that. What I love about this is one drop. I actually do 5 drops myself of this every day. Again, that's my opinion. And that's my body. Your body is going to be different, so talk to your doctor or your naturopath about that. But this is a vitamin D style that my body has really, really loved. I notice that I'm not having any of the seasonal sort of concerns that I have in other years. And I definitely feel like being very consistent with this has been easier for me than having another capsule to swallow. So that is why I've really become a fan of this Seeking Health vitamin D drop. But whatever you do, you can keep track of that in your DMinder and really have a better picture, a better estimate of what your vitamin D levels may be, as compared to just sort of guessing and hoping and wishing that your levels are okay and then not really knowing at all what you're working with. So these are 2 tools, 2 things that I have found incredibly helpful. in determining my vitamin D levels and in managing them. And then when I go into summer, I do believe that this same tool is going to help me to have a better eye on my skin health in general by being able to avoid things like sunburns and overexposing my skin to the sun. So that's what I have for you today. I hope this is helpful. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like, and hit that notification bell. And on podcast apps, I always appreciate those 5-star reviews, and I will see you guys next time.